I think everybody else individually can expand their font. So what is convenient for you, you can keep.
Yeah, I'm trying to check because I have logged in today only from one device. So I'm just checking how to enlarge the text.
You're on the mobile?
No. I have logged in from the laptop.
You can just enlarge the screen. On the mobile, you just pinch it out. On the, there is that, increase that, the percentage of screen is there, no, on the top bar. 50%, 75, 100. So click on that and increase it to fitting the screen. Are you able to read this?
Yeah, I
then
can
go
read
ahead.
it.
Yeah.
Om. 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 Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye. Hari Om. Jai Gurudev.
Yeah. Bela, you just go to that page view on the top bar.
Page view. Yeah.
Just click on that.
Yeah, I have clicked on that.
No,
single page, two
double
page.
No, not that. I think you should go to that plus minus.
Okay.
Yeah, go to the plus and click on that.
Yeah.
That will enlarge your screen. Yeah. Okay.
Dhanyavad.
Yeah.
I hope everyone can see the screen, right?
Yes, all of us can see. I'll just mute all and then you can unmute yourself.
Yes.
Yeah, unmute yourself and start.
Yeah. So we will just go through the verse 5. Uddharetatmanatmanam natmanam avasadayet atmaiva yatmano bandhuhu atmaiva ripuratmanah. Atmana, by oneself, Atmanam, oneself, Uddharet, may one lift Atmanam, oneself, Na avasadayet, may one not destroy, he, for, Atma eva, oneself alone, Atmanah bandhuhu, is one's benefactor, Atma eva, oneself alone, Atmanah ripuhu, is one's enemy. Atmana Atmanam Uddharet Atmanam na avasadayet hi Atma eva Atmanah bandhuhu Atma eva Atmanah ripuhu. May one lift oneself by oneself, may one not destroy oneself. For the self alone is one's benefactor and the self alone is one's enemy. This verse makes it very clear that you have to save yourself, that you should not destroy yourself or allow yourself to be destroyed. Why? Because Atma is oneself, is a great helper, a great benefactor for oneself. In other words, you yourself are the benefactor. And who is the beneficiary? Yourself. Therefore, you are both the beneficiary and the benefactor. Krishna also goes on to say that you are also your own enemy, which means you can become a great friend, a benefactor, or an enemy to yourself. A person who is a yoga rudha, a sarva sankalpa sannyasi, has saved himself or herself totally from all that is undesirable. In other words, from the life of samsara, just as one saves oneself from drowning by pulling oneself out of the water. In fact, all of a person's activities are meant only to save himself or herself. The person wants to become secure, to be free of all problems, including loss of money or power, loss of health, old age, and death, which means that he or she wants to save himself or herself from insecurity. Thus, everyone is busy working for his or her own safety, whether we call it self safety, self security, or self welfare. There is no question that the pursuit is selfish for the self alone. Understanding the fundamental problem. Seeking an alternative lifestyle is not what is implied here. Rather, the person is seeking answers to some very fundamental questions. Certain questions arise in the person, however vague they may be, which tend to disturb the usual activities that people naturally absorb themselves in. The questions themselves give a certain direction to one's life until the person comes to understand that he or she is under the spell of likes and dislikes, raga dveshas, to use the language of the Gita. One begins to recognize that the natural pursuit, swabhavik pravritti, that everyone engages in is out of these likes and dislikes. I like it, I want it, therefore I do it. All one's responses arise from these raga dveshas alone. And within this particular sphere of reality, everything becomes right. Anger is legitimate, sorrow is legitimate, pain is legitimate. This then is where we get confused. Where anger is legitimate, it is legitimate to get angry. Therefore, if someone says you should not get angry, you get even angrier. Even if you do not get angry, you run into problems. Once the legitimacy is accepted by you, you can move ahead without disturbing your natural activity. But when you begin questioning the very activity itself, you question the very life you are living. Only when you really question, when the flame of inquiry is proper, can you become to understand the fundamental problem. There is a mature way of approaching this problem and also an immature way of approaching it. And in the light of what we discover, there is something that can be called a prayerful life, a life of enlightened prayer, not blind prayer. There is a prayerful attitude or disposition which is karma yoga. Karma yoga implies the acceptance or appreciation of Ishvara, the Lord, and living a prayerful life. This is what brings about the capacity to be contemplative, meditative. Such a life creates this kind of a disposition naturally, a disposition in which knowledge of Atma, oneself, takes care of itself. Thus, it is very clear that because of Karma Yoga, one can gain Jnana, knowledge. Helping yourself. In this verse, the word Atma refers to you, the individual who by nature is already in the ocean of samsara. You did not suddenly slip into this samsara. You were born into it along with it. And how do you get out of it? By your own will, Atmana. You turn yourself about. You question yourself and your values. By questioning yourself, you re-estimate the whole value structure and whatever there is about it that is confusing. All problems are primarily due to improper priorities. Therefore, we have to reorganize our value structure, and in the process, our priorities will become proper. This inquiry, vichara, into one's value structure is done by oneself alone. Atmana eva. It is an inquiry into right and wrong, what one is to do and not to do. Because of this vichara, your vision undergoes a certain cognitive change. This then is one stage of the inquiry. The next stage of inquiry is also done by oneself alone. By one's own inquiry, one appreciates one's helplessness in certain situations. This itself brings about a prayerful attitude on one's part. A given situation raises certain doubts in you. Then, afterwards, there is an appreciation of Ishvara and then there is prayer. This makes a person a Vashi, one whose body, mind, and senses are together, all of which is done by one's own efforts alone. This is very important, very good line. This makes a person a Vashi, one whose body, mind, and senses are together, all of which is done by one's own efforts alone. Going to a teacher to gain the knowledge is also done by oneself and implies a certain effort on the person's part. In all of these ways, the person pulls himself or herself up. This is why Krishna says here that one's benefactor is no one else but oneself. Atma eva atmana bandhuhu. An enemy to yourself. To have been born a samsari itself is destructive. If your mind is not in order, however, if your value structure is confused, then your entire life and the lives of those around you will be confused. Thus, Krishna also says that you are your own enemy. When your own mind, Atma, your own will is abused, or when it is not used at all, then it naturally becomes your enemy. It stands against you, it destroys you. The mind is where all the notions that this or that will save us originate. These ideas are indicative of a will that has been fooled by itself and by others, because one allows oneself to be fooled. This means that the final fool is myself alone. Because I am a fool, I can be fooled. I allow myself to be fooled. Therefore, I am my own enemy. What is the use of blaming anyone? I myself am an enemy to myself. Atma eva atmana ripuhu. Do not look down upon yourself. Therefore, Krishna says, may one not destroy oneself. Atmanam na avasadayet. May you make use of the will and the change, which does not happen without your undergoing some kind of inner revolution. This inner revolution is a quiet revolution. It is not the creation of a lot of conflicting ideas. Rather, a quiet inner revolution takes place in one's way of looking at things, in one's understanding. Therefore, do not look down upon yourself is another way of taking the expression Atmanam na avasadayet, because to do so is to destroy yourself. This is very beautiful line for self-esteem. I will read once again. Therefore, Krishna says, may one not destroy oneself. Atmanam na avasadayet. May you make use of the will and change, which does not happen without your undergoing some kind of inner revolution. This inner revolution is a quiet revolution. It is not the creation of a lot of conflicting ideas. Rather, a quiet inner revolution takes place in one's way of looking at things, in one's understanding. Therefore, do not look down upon yourself is another way of taking the expression Atmanam na avasadayet, because to do so is to destroy yourself. In this process, you may sometimes have to mother the child within you and thus take care of it. If as a child you had been neglected, then you have probably picked up some problems along the way. And who has to take care for this child? Who is the friend to this child? You alone, as an adult, have to mother the child within. This is what Krishna was trying to convey when he said here, may one lift oneself up. Atmanam uddharet. The verse can be taken in an absolute sense in that at every level one can say, may one not destroy oneself. Atmanam na avasadayit. May one lift oneself up. Atmanam uddharet. Since one has to take care of oneself at every level in the final analysis, there is no other force, nothing external to yourself that can help you. Oneself means one's own body, mind, sense complex, karya, karana, sangata. This karya, karana, sangata, along with the will, is both the friend of the Atma and the enemy of the Atma. In other words, you can be either your own benefactor or your own enemy. This means that to become free of this samsara, another person cannot become a bandhu, a benefactor for you. Only you can do what is to be done. To grow or to mature within the samsara, another person may be helpful to you. But to get out of the samsara, you have to release yourself. In fact, where moksha is concerned, the very person who was previously your benefactor could very well become an obstruction to you. Bandhu implies affection and friendship, which can also be binding, even though such qualities may be quite helpful to one's emotional growth. Therefore, in the final analysis, in terms of gaining moksha, you are the only one who can be a friend to yourself. And unless you become a friend to yourself, you become inimical to yourself and become your own enemy. That is such a beautiful takeaway. Anyone would like to share before we proceed to the new verse?
Yeah, I was just wanting to share that in Arjuna, we see all these three stages that Swamiji has beautifully described. As in, he was living his life as a prince and he decided to go to war. He got ready and was there. But when he saw his family there, he started having these questions. They're my own people. Why am I killing them? And then all that barrage of questions and the consequence of killing, all those questions came up. And then when Krishna tells him, why are you behaving in such a way? This is very unbecoming of you. Then he surrenders to him. He um, he tells him, I'm your student. He becomes prayerful, and then he becomes his student. He says, please tell me what is Shreyas for me. I'm confused. I'm your student. So all those three steps that happen in the journey of a person where he emotionally matures. Similarly, Gurudev says, when people ask, what is the purpose of my life? Who am I? What is my role here? All these questions are very, very precious. So when these questions crop up, that is when you're steering your life's direction, your inner direction, away from just living a mundane life. Eat, sleep, make merry. You're moving from that state uh, to becoming a seeker. So that is very precious. And then compared to how Duryodhana was, when you contrast Arjuna to Duryodhana, um, Duryodhana was completely his enemy from the very beginning. He was never his friend. His mind was his enemy, and he did not know about it. Or he knew in a way, but he was helpless. He says, Janami dharmam nachame pravrittihi, janami adharmam nachame nivrittihi. I know what dharma is, but I'm not able to follow it. I know what adharma is, I'm not able to come out of it. So that way, it's again for all of us to look within and say, how much of an Arjuna are we? How much of Duryodhana are we? It is an inner battle. This whole Mahabharata is actually in our own mind. So how often are we is our mind our friend? Are we taking care of the mind like a mother takes care of her child? It is an inner revolution. That is such a and then that inner revolution is that deeper understanding where we use all these 5 sutras that we've learned in the happiness program, and all of them come to our aid when you deal with your own self, with people, with situations.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I like that one line of Swamiji also, when somebody is helping you, but you do not have to become emotionally dependent. I mean, that is also such a nice
Yeah,
revelation.
it becomes a bondage ultimately, no? Mm.
Yeah, very beautiful. Yeah, you become emotionally dependent, correct? When someone helps,
Yeah,
you have to be.
and it reminded me of Swami Chinmayananda's one word that today's younger generation, they are not useless, but they are used less. So their mind, if it is utilized, they are taught how to utilize their own potential, into the right way, then they themselves can lift themselves.
Very beautiful, very beautiful.
Further, Krishna continues, बन्धुरात्मात्मनस्त्स्य येनात्मैवात्मना जितः अनात्मनस्तु शत्रुत्वे वर्तेतात्मैव शत्रुवत्. Yena, by whom, Atmana eva, by oneself alone, Atma, oneself, Jitaha, has been mastered. Tasya, for that person, self, Atma, the self, Atmanah, of oneself, Bandhuhu, friend, too. Whereas Anatmanah, for the self who has not mastered oneself, Atma, the self, eva, alone, Shatruvata, like an enemy. Shatrutve, in the status of an enemy. Varteta, would remain. For that self who has mastered oneself by oneself, the self alone is a friend of oneself. Whereas for the self who has not mastered oneself, the self alone would remain in the status of an enemy, like an enemy. Tasya here refers to the Atma, oneself, discussed in the previous verse. For that self, the self is a friend. When the self has been won over, Jitah. And what self is being discussed here? What Atma can be won over? It cannot be Sat Chit Ananda Atma, because I can only win over something that I can objectify. And the only object in which I have the I notion, Atma Buddhi, is the Karya Karana Sanghata, the body mind sense complex. It is this complex then that is in one's hands and has to be mastered. Won over by whom? By oneself. Atmana, meaning by one's own inquiry, by one's own discipline, by one's own will and effort. This is an important line. I will just read it once again. Tasya here refers to the Atma, oneself, discussed in the previous verse. For that self, the self is a friend. When the self has been won over, Jitaha. And what self is being discussed here? What Atma can be won over? It cannot be Satchit Ananda Atma, because I can only win over something that I can objectify. And the only object in which I have the I notion, Atma Buddhi, is the Karya Karana Sanghata, the body mind sense complex. It is this complex then that is in one's hands and has to be mastered. Won over by whom? By oneself, Atmana, meaning by one's own inquiry, by one's own discipline, by one's own will and effort. The three powers at our disposal. The one who has mastered the body, mind, sense complex is called Avashi and is a friend to himself or herself. The body, mind, sense complex serves this person with the threefold powers, Shaktis. It is endowed with the power to think, explore, know, and remember. Jnana Shakti, the power to desire, to will, Ichha Shakti, and the power to act, to make or do, Kriya Shakti. These three powers are at the disposal of one who is a Vashi, the one who has mastery over the entire Karya Karana Sanghata. This is the most important line. I will read it once again. The one who has mastered the body, mind, sense complex is called a Vashi and is a friend to himself or herself. The body mind sense complex serves this person with the threefold powers, Shaktis. It is endowed with the power to think, explore, know, and remember, that is Gnana Shakti, the power to desire, to will, Ichha Shakti, and the power to act, to make or do, that is Kriya Shakti. These three powers are at the disposal of one who is a Vashi, the one who has mastery over the entire Karya Karana Sanghata. When you have the mastery over the body, mind, and senses, then all their powers are with you. Therefore, the Karya Karana Sanghata becomes a benefactor for gaining that which is desirable. It can take you anywhere, to Brahmalok or even to Brahman, to Moksha. This is the maximum it can do, because you cannot become greater than Brahman. You are already Brahman, in fact. As one who has mastery over the body, mind, sense complex, you are endowed with the powers you require to recognize this fact. Because you can gain punya by following the life of dharma, the karya karana sanghata again becomes a bandhu. And for gaining moksha, it also becomes a benefactor to you. Thus, the same karya karana sanghata, the body, mind, sense complex, is a benefactor to you all the way, provided, of course, that it is won over by you. This is a condition. I will read once again. This is very important condition. Because you can gain punya by following a life of dharma, the karya karana sanghata again becomes a bandhu. And for gaining moksha, it also becomes a benefactor to you. Thus, the same karya karana sanghata, the body, mind, sense complex, is a benefactor to you all the way, provided, of course, that it is won over by you. So that is very important. If it is not won over by you, then the same body, mind, sense complex, they become bondage for you to attain the moksha. Now, suppose this
Can you
body,
read
mind,
that? Sorry, Bela, can you read that thing?
yeah,
Because you gain punya, that thing, that
yeah,
verse.
yes. Because you can gain punya by following a life of dharma, the karya karana sanghata again becomes a bandhu. And for gaining moksha, it also becomes a benefactor to you. Thus, the same karya karana sanghata, the body, mind, sense complex, is a benefactor to you all the way, provided, of course, that it is won over by you.
Yeah, here I think it will remain a bandhu, whether it is a bandhu or a benefactor. It depends on how you're using it. If you are using it only to gain punya, you will continue to be bound by it. You might be a dharmi, but then you will only be a dharmi. You will not be a karma yogi. So, in order to make it a benefactor, you will have to move from just using your body, mind, sense complex to perform dharmic actions to becoming a karma yogi, where then it will actually be a benefactor.
Very true. And main condition, without kartritva bhavana. You are not the doer. Then it will be like
Mm. Otherwise, you can, it is like those yamimam pushpitam vacham pravadanti manish. So those people, they continue to do all those actions only to gain punya, only to gain a birth in heaven. But that will not liberate them.
I'm sorry?
It is, if you are using your karya karana sanghata, the body mind sense complex, you have it under control, but you're only using it for gaining punya. You're doing
Yes.
those actions to gain punya, that is your ultimate end. Then it is a limited end. It is like you'll fall back into samsara again and again, because you're
Yes.
only even punya is binding. Like
Correct.
papa is binding, punya is also binding. So you, in order to move beyond this, from being a dharmi, you have to become a karma yogi, wherein your aim is lifted higher up. It is to liberate yourself. So you still continue to have that vashi of the body, mind, sense complex, but then you've steered your life direction towards knowledge, towards moksha. From a dharmi, you've become a mumukshu.
Yeah, that's so beautiful.
Yeah, Bella, you can continue.
Yeah. Now, suppose this body mind sense complex is not won over by you, but instead is holding you hostage. Then what happens? The body mind sense complex cannot become a bandhu for you. Instead, you are a bandhu for the body, mind, and senses. In this way, the same Atma, Karya Karana Sanghata, becomes Ripu, an enemy, one who creates obstructions for you, one who puts the proverbial spokes in your wheels. The person who does not have Atma oneself in his or her own hands is called Anatma in this verse. This is the person for whom the Karya Karana Sanghata remains as an enemy alone, meaning that the self plays the role of an enemy. Krishna makes it very clear that there is no enemy other than oneself alone. This is again, I will read this line. The person who does not have Atma, oneself, in his or her own hands is called Anatma in this verse. This is the person for whom the Karya Karana Sanghata remains as an enemy alone, meaning that the self plays the role of an enemy. Krishna makes it very clear that there is no enemy other than oneself alone. Generally, we point a finger at someone other than ourselves and declare that person as an enemy. This is done by everyone to some degree or other. And if no one is available locally, Saturn or some other planet will be accused. Everyone feels persecuted by someone or something. Always there is some imagined fear in people that makes them point at someone as an enemy. By doing this, of course, you are giving the other person a handle with which he or she can disturb you. No one can disturb you unless you allow them to. Nevertheless, people do have this persecution problem to some extent and they suffer from it. In fact, whenever you point out an enemy with your index finger, your accusing finger, there are 3 remaining fingers that point back towards yourself. These 3 fingers, therefore, are said to stand for the physical body, mind, and senses. The Karya Karana Sanghata, that is Atma, oneself, the only enemy there is. In this way, then Atma occupies the place of the enemy. Just like an external enemy, it is inimical to you. That is so beautiful. Our Gurudev tells, no, when you point out a finger to others, those are the rest of the 3 fingers are pointing to you. So here Swamiji is repeating the same.
And one understanding of this verse where Atma here is not Sachidananda Atma, it is the body, mind, sense complex. So when we're talking of Anatma and Atma here, I think that we have to be clear about is that the point that is being made is the Atma here refers to the body, mind, sense complex. So if your Atma is your enemy as well as your friend. So your Atma becomes your friend the moment um, you have it under your control. Otherwise, if you let that sing the song, then you are the same Atma becomes your enemy.
Yes, especially for all of, like, we remain in that Deha Bhavana, right?
Mm.
That is so beautiful. Yeah.
Hey Gurudev, here there are some people in very abusive relationships and all that. As per Swamiji, you are your own enemy, he says. So, how some women they go through all sorts of, very bad situation in their life. I'm not able to really get clarity on this.
Yeah, here it reminded me of once Persiji had very beautifully said, no? Like, somebody is telling you you are useless, but if you have your own self-esteem which is higher than what others think, then naturally you can lift yourself. You will not wait for others to tell you how good you are or how talented you are, because you yourself know.
That is one. And also, if you remember, there is this in the Datta Charitra, I think there is this lady, housewife, who the husband actually, husband is a leper or so, he has some disease, and he's a womanizer. In spite of that, this lady takes care of him with all the devotion. She's going through all that pain. In one sense, if you look at it, she's going through a lot of difficulty, a lot of challenges. But then in her inner faculty, she has the only bhavana that he is her husband, and she has to do her duty there. Her responsibility there is to take care of him in the best way possible. So I think even women who are in an abusive relationship, it is their inner makeup that determines how they uh, whether they suffer or they're just going through the pain. So this again brings to us the fact that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. It is all in our mental makeup, isn't it? So,
Yes.
and
And
What I perceive is you can, inner attitude you change.
right,
Outside, whatever it is, you can't change anything. Accept it. Be peaceful.
accept
Okay.
it. And like what Gurudev says, especially with, I mean, it's a little deviation, but then since you've brought this question up, he says you give your 100% into the relationship. If in spite of your 100% it is not working out, then it is time to just move on. So you don't need to sit and struggle over there. You have put in your 100% in giving to the relationship, to the growth. If it is not happening, then you just move on. So you don't need to get stuck to the relationship. So the thing is, you we have those three options to do, not to do, or do otherwise, isn't it? So you take the whichever course is the best for the person. I'm talking of this person who's you have brought up as being in an abusive relationship.
Very nice, very clear. Thank you, Brahmaraj.
Yeah, Bhagavad Gita has such subtle messages. I mean, Bhagwan has given it in such a beautiful way to look at the life from a very, very beautiful perspective. I think in introduction also it is said, no, that you are the problem and you are the solution. Swamiji had said that
Very true. There is no other. That is what
Mhm.
all of this is only about yourself. All of this is pointing to you. Which is why Gurudev says in the Art of Living app, that is what shows up, no? If you can handle your mind, you can handle the world. It is all about you handling your mind.
See, if you are there, the whole world is there. No? If you are not there, the whole world is not. So it's all about you, me, the world. World will be there, but it will be going on. But for you, it is not there if you are not there. So everything depends upon you, how you want.
And this is all about the Pratibhasika Satta, isn't it? We've learnt about those three orders of reality. Paramatika Satta, Pratibhasika Satta, and Vyavaharika Satta. So each one of us creates our world ourselves. My world may be different from Bela's world, may be different from Maltiji's world. So it is your mental makeup and how you look at the world, the observer. The world is relative. The truth of existence is relative to the observer. So the more you are in sync with the universe, you're looking at things as they are, you're more in sync with the Paramartika Satta. And
Wow,
that is
that
the
is
whole
such
journey.
a beautiful line, Brahmaraji. Can you repeat once again? That is so beautiful. The more you are in sync with
Yeah,
the
that is
universe.
what you see. If you if you can see what is as is, then you are in sync with the universe. The problem is we cover it with our own concepts, our own judgments, our own vasanas, and then we relate to that. A person a person X might be very, very good. Everybody is good. There is that goodness in everyone. That is what Gurudev sees. If you look at the world with Gurudev's lens, with Gurudev's eyes, there is no culprit. Everybody is divine. Problem is we look at the world with our own lens, which is the Pratibhasika Satta. It is different from how Gurudev looks at the world, how the divine looks at the world. So the more you are in sync with that, then you are closer to reality. Then there is no other. There is only one. So that again brings us, the farther away we are from the Paramartika Satta, the more our own body, mind, sense complex is our enemy. The more we are in sync, it is our friend. So that is the whole journey.
So beautiful. I think birds and other natural trees and they follow the same principle. That's why they
Very,
are.
very true. Trees are actually so evolved. They are actually enlightened. When you look at it, when you compare a tree to a human being, a thinking person, the tree is more evolved than a human being, a normal human being.
That's very wonderful explanation. Dhanyavad, Brahmaraji. You take your mind with you wherever you go. When you analyze your complaints, you find that they are mental, meaning they are of the mind. You allow yourself to be affected by the world, and then afterwards, you call the world bad and renounce it. You want to renounce this world you have labeled bad and go to a world that you have imagined to be good, which is called fantasy. But when you go to this good world, you find it is as bad as the one you left behind. Why? Because you carry your mind, the enemy, with you. You do not leave it behind. This is so beautiful. I'll read once again. When you analyze your complaints, you find that they are mental, meaning they are of the mind. You allow yourself to be affected by the world, and then afterwards, you call the world bad and renounce it. You want to renounce this world you have labeled bad and go to a world that you have imagined to be good, which is called fantasy. But when you go to this good world, you find it is as bad as the one you left behind. Why? Because you carry your mind, the enemy, with you. You do not leave it behind. The same mind that interpreted the world as bad is not given up, and with that mind, you move to the so-called good world. In this way, then the mind is carried with you wherever you go. Even if you go to heaven, you will find problems there because the same mind goes with you. It is carried forward and carried over. And having the same mind with you, the same complaining mind, you always find reason enough to complain, whatever the place or the circumstances. This is what Krishna means when he says that one is indeed like an enemy for oneself. I will read it again as it is very, very important. The same mind that interpreted the world as bad is not given up, and with that mind, you move to the so-called good world. In this way, then the mind is carried with you wherever you go. Even if you go to heaven, you will find problems there because the same mind goes with you. It is carried forward and carried over. And having this same mind with you, this same complaining mind, please underline the word, the same complaining mind. You always find reason enough to complain, whatever the place or the circumstances. This is what Krishna means when he says that one is indeed like an enemy for oneself.
Fantastic, it is really.
When you carry such a mind with you, mind that is always interpreting given situations according to its own notions, even your guru, considered to be a great bandhu, benefactor, cannot help you. What can any guru do if the person is always thinking, my guru does not care about me? I don't think he considers me a good student, and so on. One makes such conclusions because of that same mind alone. Finally speaking, then, you are the only bandhu there is. This is such a beautiful line. Nobody can help you if there is complaining mind. In the next verse, Krishna discusses the person who has been a friend to himself or herself.
Here, the previous paragraph, when Swamiji talks of moving to another a good place. It is like how people change houses, change jobs, change situations, change partners even, in order to be happy. Like Gurudev says, it is like you're wanting to shift from one boat to the other. If you know how to row one boat properly, then no matter what boat you are in, you will row it well. The problem is we think that the next boat, the other boat is better to row, and therefore we keep shifting. So again, it boils down to handling your own mind. It is not external. The change in the external situation is not going to change your internal milieu. What you have to change is your inner perception, inner perspective, inner thought thinking process. That inner maturity has to happen. Then no matter where you are in, whatever situation you are in, you will be your friend, and you can uplift yourself by yourself.
Jitatmanah prashantasya. Sorry, I forgot to. In the next verse, Krishna discusses the person who has been a friend to himself or herself. Jitatmanah prashantasya paramatma samahitah शीतोष्ण सुख दुःखेषु तथा मानापमानयोः. Sheet Ushna Sukha Dukheshu, with reference to heat and cold, pleasure and pain. Tatha, so too, Mana Apmana Yoho, with reference to praise and criticism. Jit Atmanaha, for the one who has mastery over oneself. Prashantasya, for the one whose mind is tranquil. Atma, the mind. Parama Samahitaha, is always in a state of composure.
We're not able to hear you, Bela.
Composure. It's a very beautiful.
I don't know whether it was only me, but for the last minute or so, couldn't hear you.
Yeah, it is, the message is coming, the internet is unstable. So should I?
Even I couldn't hear you, Belaji.
Yeah.
Oh.
So maybe you can just do the bhavata was fine, word to word meaning. You can just read that one, the complete Sanskrit sentence, and then you can read the bhavata.
Yeah. With reference to heat and cold, pleasure and pain, so too with reference to praise and criticism, for the one who has mastery over oneself, for the one whose mind is tranquil, the mind is always in a state of composure. Bhavartha, for the one who has mastery over oneself, whose mind is tranquil with reference to heat and cold, pleasure and pain, and praise and criticism, the mind is always in a state of composure. This verse can be looked at in two ways, depending on whether the word param is placed with samahitaha or atma. First, we shall look at it as atma, mind, parama samhitaha, and then we shall look at it as Paramatma Samhitaha, as Shankara does in his commentary. Is my voice okay now, or it is still breaking?
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
I will read once again. This verse can be looked at in two ways, depending on whether the word param is placed with samahitah or atma. First, we shall look at it as atma, mind, parama samahitah, and then we shall look at it as paramatma samahitah, as Shankara does in his commentary. We have already seen the meaning of Jitatma, one whose body, mind, and senses are mastered. To have mastery over your mind means that you are not carried away by its various moods. In other words, moods should be left to grammar, that is, imperative mood, potential mood, subjunctive mood, etc. For one who has mastered the mind, there are no other moods than these.
Oh my
So
God.
good.
It's
His
Swamiji's
sense of
sense
humor
of
is,
humor, really. His sense of humor
I
is.
really admire. I will read once again.
Yeah, yeah, please
We,
go ahead and read
we
that.
have already seen the meaning of Jitatma, one whose body, mind, and senses are mastered. To have mastery over your mind means that you are not carried away by its various moods. In other words, moods should be left to grammar. That is, imperative mood, potential mood, subjunctive mood, etc. For the one who has mastered the mind, there are no other moods than these. People are generally subject to moods. In the morning, there is one mood. In the evening, there is another mood. And in between, there are so many more. When the moods of the mind are understood properly, you are not carried away by the mind.
Nice, very nice.
This is not to say that you should not have moods. To even suggest such a thing puts you in a bad mood. Please do not think, therefore. Please do not think. Therefore, I say that one should not have moods. Have your moods by all means and understand them so that you will not be carried away by them. Then you are the master of the moods. They are not the master of you. If you can gain the space necessary to come out on top of the mood, then the mood does not take you as its hostage. This then is what is meant by Jitatma, one who has mastered his or her moods. This is so beautiful. I'll read once again. This is not to say that you should not have the moods. To even suggest such a thing puts you in a bad mood. Please do not think. Therefore, I say that one should not have moods. Have your moods by all means and understand them so that you will not be carried away by them. Then you are the master of the moods. They are not the master of you. If you can gain the space necessary to come out on top of the mood, then the mood does not take you as its hostage. This then is what is meant by Jitatma, one who has mastered his or her moods. The nature of tranquility. Naturally, such a person will be one whose mind is tranquil. Prashanta. Why? Because he or she is Jitatma, one who is not carried away by the moods of the mind. Thus, for one who is Jitatma and Prashanta, there is no situation that can disturb the person. The mind is always in his or her hands, meaning that it is always composed Parama Samhita, Samahita. It never loses itself in any situation. When everything is going well, when the food you want is right there, when the music is just right, when the people you want to talk to are readily available, it is not difficult for the mind to be composed. In this verse, however, we are talking about a person whose mind is always composed, Parama Samahita, in all situations. The compound here, Sthita, Shita, Ushna, Sukha, Dukkheshu. stands for all situations, all the opposites. Shita means cold, not simply pleasantly cold, but so cold that you cannot stand it. Similarly, Ushna means unpleasantly hot. Thus, neither the cold nor the heat referred to here is at all comfortable. I will read this once again. The nature of tranquility. Naturally, such a person will be one whose mind is tranquil, prashanta. Why? Because he or she is jitatma, one who is not carried away by the moods of the mind. Thus, for one who is jitatma and prashanta, there is no situation that can disturb the person. The mind is always in his or her hands, meaning that it is always composed. Param samhita, samahita. It never loses itself in any situation. When everything is going well, when the food you want is right there, when the music is just right, when the people you want to talk to are readily available, it is not difficult for the mind to be composed. In this verse, however, we are talking about a person whose mind is always composed Parama Samhita in all situations. Thus, compound here, Shita, Ushna, Sukha, Dukkheshu stands for all situations, all the opposites. Shita means cold, not simply pleasantly cold, but so cold that you cannot stand it. Similarly, Ushna means unpleasantly hot. Thus, neither the cold nor the heat referred to here is at all comfortable. Then again, there are situations that give people some comfort, some happiness, some pleasure, sukha, and other situations that give discomfort, unhappiness, and sorrow, dukkha. In all of these constantly changing situations, one who has mastery over the mind remains always composed. For such a person, there is no question of dukkha coming, because for dukkha to come, one's composure must already be gone. The point being made here is that all those situations that generally bring about sukha or dukkha for people create no disturbance whatsoever in the mind of the person whose mind is always composed. This verse also points out one more set of opposites, praise, mana, and censure or shame, apamana. These two are given special mention here because they are very difficult to deal with. Even praise can be hard to handle sometimes because when someone praises you, you may think the person is going to ask you for something. Therefore, you are afraid. You can handle the praise all right, but if it is just a preamble to something else, you do not hear it because you are waiting for what is to come. Censure is always difficult to handle. Suppose someone says about himself that he can handle criticism very well. And if another person counters that by saying, no, you cannot, this in itself is enough for the person to feel offended. This is because he cannot handle censure, even though he thought he could. Another example of taking things personally and getting offended is when you are doing a particular job and someone tells you that you are not to do that job, you are to do another. Immediately, you are inclined to take it personally. This is so beautiful. It is our day-to-day happenings, every moment to moment.
And at I can't but think of our happiness program points here. Opposite values are complementary, and that brings you to that state of equanimity. And then don't be a football of others' opinion is this mana apamana. You would be able to take praise and criticism in the with the right attitude if you don't get tossed and turned over. Again, it's just such a huge wonder that how Gurudev has capsuled everything into this happiness program. Such a marvel. Is there more to this verse than what you have read just now?
Yes, Brahmaraji, it is still here. Shall I complete?
Yeah, I think you can complete and then we'll do Manana on that.
Yeah. Why criticism is so difficult to take? Criticism is very difficult to take because it is personalized. It touches some painful part of you. This problem comes from one's childhood. If parents constantly criticize their child, the criticism becomes a problem for the child. It creates a vulnerable area, a raw, sensitive area, and any subsequent criticism causes the pain to come out. This is the aspect of criticism that makes it so difficult to handle. The person discussed in this verse is one who has taken care of these problems through proper understanding. Without the proper understanding, new philosophies may be created which are nothing but superimpositions upon the pain, sorrow, and other problems. To simply conclude that you should not subject yourself to censure, for example, does not work. You have to work on gaining mastery over your mind because these opposites, cold and heat, pleasure and pain, praise and censure, are all disturbing elements for people. What Krishna is saying here is that these pairs of opposites do disturb you. Therefore, make sure that they do not disturb you. To say, I should not be disturbed, is a superimposition upon yourself. The one who is disturbed and is nothing but confusion. In fact, people who preach that you should not be disturbed. Am I audible? Because my internet, it is messaging that it is unstable. If you want me to repeat something, please tell me.
No, you were.
Okay. What Krishna is saying here is that these pairs of opposites do disturb you. Therefore, make sure that they do not disturb you. To say, I should not be disturbed is a superimposition upon yourself, the one who is disturbed and is nothing but confusion, in fact. People who preach that you should not be disturbed never help anyone because whatever they say becomes superimposed on the old pain that is already there. It becomes a superimposed philosophy, a list of do's and don'ts, shoulds and should nots. The old pain that is inside simply becomes confused by the new superimposed philosophy, thereby adding to the confusion that was already there. Instead of the new philosophy helping, it becomes a problem. We must therefore understand very clearly what this verse is trying to say. In all situations, the person's mind, Atma, is always in a state of great composure, Parama Samahitah. And we have to work for such composure, which does not imply the superimposition of ideas. The verse can also be taken as how Shankara took it. The person whose Karya Karana Sanghata is mastered is called a Jitatma. And because his mind is tranquil, he is also called Prashanta in this verse. For such a person, Paramatma, Brahman, becomes the Atma. In other words, The person who has the knowledge recognizes Sat Chit Ananda Atma, Paramatma, as his or her own Atma. And such a person is one who is always the same Samahita, even when the situations change. Swamiji is the biggest psychiatrist as well. He's going such a deep into the mind. I love the idea that it is natural tendency, but when as a child, when you are yeah.
Uh,
Can't hear you, Leila.
yeah,
I will read once again.
no, we heard what you said, but you were sharing something that was not audible.
Yeah, it is like when you are already disturbed and when someone tells you that you should not be disturbed, it is more confusing for the mind because you are already in pain and the other person is saying you should not be disturbed. It is like superimposition of your own philosophy. So it creates confusion.
No, you were said then you are criticized as a child. After that, I could not hear.
Yes, as a child, when he or she is criticized that you are not good, I mean, you should not have done this, you should not do this and that. Then when he grows as an adult, those all, you can say that those all criticisms, they are still intact in his mind. And when as an adult, when he is disturbed and again when he's told that you should not get disturbed in this situation, then it becomes like it is not an acceptable fact for such an adolescent. It creates more confusion.
This is why we have so many books on power of positive thinking. They're all a humbug because they're all superimposing. That will not help at all. It will only lead to more confusion. It is
But
all
is
about
it not,
giving-
sorry, is it
yeah.
not going away from the reality? Because how can that be a confusion? Is it not a confirmation of what used to happen now and not a confusion? It is a confirmation. And is it not going away from the reality that, yeah, because everybody is born with certain kind of swabhava and the pattern would be there, recognizing that, is it not the right thing to do?
Um, no. I think what we're talking of superimposing here is, for instance, your person is going through a pairs of opposites, experiencing pairs of opposites, or someone has humiliated him. When you just tell him you should not be humiliated, is like you're superimposing the fact that he should not be humiliated. That is not going to help him. He will only feel more confused about it. The pain is not going to go. The pain of the experience of humiliation is not going to go, because he's only being given a set of do's and don'ts. What will actually help is a deeper understanding, and to know that you are above these humiliations, above this. So if he's connected to the Satchidananda, that the Paramatma, and he has won over his body mind sense complex, then he is able to take any pairs of opposites. Then it doesn't become a superimposition. He's not enforcing it upon himself, that the feeling that I should not get humiliated. All these books
Yes.
that are written in the power of positive thinking and all are nothing but superimposing ideas, isn't it? So
Yes.
that is why Gurudev says you focus on the breath. The breath, therefore, is such a savior. It helps you handle your mind. It helps you bring yourself back to the center. Because you can't handle your mind with the mind. No, how can you tell your mind, don't be humiliated? It will not. It will not work that way. So we have a tool, that is the breath. We have meditation. So with all this, you are of course using the mind ultimately, but you are using it to become um, to befriend it. It becomes your benefactor.
I think we can just close our eyes for a few seconds because there were very beautiful takeaways, and please share your brief takeaways for today.
Jai Gurudev. I did not understand the psychology of the child when we criticize them. We are not criticizing them, we are pointing their mistake. No, means we should not correct them.
I'm sorry, there is, Suresh, there is a difference between a criticism and pointing out the mistake. I mean, this is a very deep psychology. Uh, uh, Criticism is, I believe, it is a negative term. When you always try to compare with other kid and you say that, that is criticism. We have to, as a parent, we have to point out their mistake, but there is a way to tell that also, I think. Criticism itself is a negative term. That's what here Swamiji is telling, I think.
Here I have some practical experience with school children. You know, in a class of say 50 students,
Yeah,
about
that
10,
I understand.
15, about 10, 15 of them would be a little backward in their studies. But they are the ones, like their grades are not good. So even the teachers are under pressure from the principal, etc., as to why these children are not coming up to the mark. So they are called dull, they are called dim-witted, even by the teacher in school. I have seen this happening with my own eyes. And also they call them names. Other than that, the parents pick up from the teachers also. And you see, for the child, who are the real heroes? Their parents and their teacher. And they exactly believe whatever they are told. If they are called a buffalo, an ox, or a donkey by the teacher or their parents, they believe that they are not good in studies. And then they will never come up. But when I have worked with such students in the past, what I have done is I know what is important in a subject. So 50% of the subject is very important out of the whole chapter. Out of that, how can they get 35% marks? What normally comes in exams? Prepare them for first that much. Don't give them the load of the entire 100% if they are weak in studies. Make them do 50%, which you are sure would come in the exams. Let them get through by 35%. Is the first part of it. And after that, when you have completed the 50, you can move over towards a 60 or 75%. In any case, all children cannot take 100% of the entire subject matter. That is how I have brought up school children when I used to teach. I usually used to take up challenges of taking up so-called dull students who are weak in their studies. Rather than call them names, then they fall more into that downward trap. That is what Swamiji meant here, probably. The
Yeah,
children treat
very
their
true.
parents and teachers as heroes. Don't
Same with
downgrade them.
the individual subjects. Not everybody is good at mathematics. So when a child is not doing so well in maths, if the parent goes on harping saying, "Oh, you're not good in maths, you're not good in maths," that will remain with them. In fact, there is, when for Know Your Teen, the program Know Your Teen, there is an example that is given. There is a school teacher who who's a maths teacher who gives, in the first test itself, gives all the students 100% marks, and they're all very surprised. And then, she towards the end of the semester, all of them, including those that were not very good at maths, their grades improved exceedingly well. So it is for the teacher's eyes. She said, for me, each one of you is an achiever. Each of you is 100%, is capable of getting the 100%. So in the first test itself, she gives all of them by default 100%, and that itself brings the child's, all those who are kind of below average, their interest, it sparks the interest, and then they ultimately improve their grades. So as parents, we have that responsibility to recognize they have some weaknesses. Not everybody has everything, and work towards it, like how Percy G has very nicely mentioned. Putting them down is not the way forward. By putting anybody down, you're not going to help their growth. Why anybody else? Your own self. Here, the whole focus is about yourself. So, your own mind, you can use it to either uplift yourself or denounce yourself.
One more thing that I've noticed is, as children, when you sit with the weaker children, suppose you give them a tick when they say something right, and you put a wrong, a cross, when they say something wrong. They feel so frustrated at seeing the cross. And then you give up completely, you give up that system of putting tick and cross completely. What you do is, when he has done something right, you give him a star. Just replace that old system of putting tick and cross with a star when he does right. And he doesn't get a star when it is wrong. But he feels so happy when, and 3 stars gets him a sweet. Say, see how the child will progress. You just try it and see. This is my personal experience. Some children even don't like getting a wrong cross on their books. They feel very frustrated and upset. Each child is made differently.
Yeah, this is very important, not just for parents, also for teachers, bringing up children in the right way, because that is how they grow up. A child is very comfortable, um, very free. But then we as parents tell them, when we take them to someone else's house, don't do this, don't do that. We set up so many rules and regulations. And then, like what we say in the Know Your Child program, they grow up to becoming adults. And then there you will have to tell, they have to come and, learn in the happiness program, accept people and situations as they are. As a child, they were doing it very naturally. But then as they're they're given so many, their life is shrouded with so many do's and don'ts. That is with one thing. But for me, the one beautiful aspect of today's Manana was the three shaktis that you get when you have your body, mind, sense complex under your control. When you have the Vashi of the body, mind, sense complex, then you have at three levels: at the thought level, the mind level, and the action level. You um, you have that Icha Shakti, Jnana Shakti, knowledge level at the thought level, as well as the action level, the Kriya Shakti. All of that manifest.
I missed out a lot of listening, but the last sentence I could hear that do's and don'ts. We set rules for children about do's and don'ts. Then how do we tell them what is wrong and right if we don't tell them?
We should let them know the consequence of what they do. If they're doing something wrong, let them know the consequence. And then gently steer them away from that, rather than, putting down strict do's and don'ts. You have to, as a parent, you have to mold them, no doubt about it.
And I do remember Guruji was telling until they are 12 years or certain age, you have to use Sam, Dam, Dand to mold them, because later on they don't, they are fixed identity. But until then, you can mold them. This is what
According to
one
the
of the talks.
Shodasha Samskaras, according to that, there is until 5 years, you become your child's, you take care of your child like a mm, there is no disciplining a child until 5 years. But from 5 to 12 is the time you discipline your child. And then from 12 years onwards, actually 12, it's actually 16, but now the age is advanced because children are all getting emotionally, intellectually mature earlier. From 16 years onwards, you become their friend. So the disciplining, the Samadhana Danda, the Samadhana Danda comes in between 5 years and 16, 5 and 12 currently, I think. So that is the time when you tell them. Sama is when you make them understand. Dana is when you take away their rewards. And then Danda is ultimate. That is the last step. But sometimes we use that in the reverse order. We don't even use Sama Dana. We just use Danda. And that becomes deleterious.
This is
Sama
when,
Dana
you
Danda
know what,
Bheda. Bheda is also there. Wherein if there are two children and one child is not doing something right, you kind of be indifferent to that child and you pay attention to the other child. That bheda itself will make that other child start feeling that something he or she is doing is not right. So I think all these 4 steps are there.
what you said about giving dand first, that is what mostly parents do. They give out the
That's, yeah,
punishment first and they call the child names, like,
yeah,
and said that what they did was wrong. Instead of that, suppose it's just an ordinary fight between a younger and a elder brother or whatever, siblings. They do tend to fight, and the younger one is crying. So then you say, you start with getting a yes out of that elder person first, elder brother first. You say, your brother is crying, no? Do you think what you did was right? Should you have hit your brother? Just having a line of questions ready in your mind first, and then, giving out questions, the child will come, yes, what I did was wrong. Let him realize his mistake through his own inner voice, rather than telling him that what you did was wrong yourself and then punish him. Is your brother crying or not? What makes him cry? Like that, if you keep on questioning like that, did you hit him? Did you scold him? Did you take his toy away? Whatever it is. And then that person will realize that what he did was wrong.
And also, Gurudev mentioned in one of his talks, children should be, even spanking is okay, because later when they become older, they'll not be able to take in society. There'll be so many, they have to face, they'll become very egoistic if you keep on pampering them constantly. Not, it's
Like Swami Vimlanandaji from the Chinmaya mission mentioned once. She says the role of a parent and of a teacher, any caregiver to a child, is like that of a potter. When the potter puts the mold of mud on the potter's wheel, he taps it from outside, from inside. He keeps on molding it. If it is going a little out of shape, he taps it back to shape. So similarly, we as parents have to is our role is allowing them to grow and correcting them, doing those corrective steps whenever required. There are beautiful takeaways that as parents we can have. I think it was it Rumi who had mentioned, your children are not, they're not born uh, to you, they're born through you. You are only their caretakers. They're God's children. And each of them has their own, I'm not saying the whole thing, but it's a beautiful statement that is given about how children are and how our attitude towards children should be. We as parents think we own them and that we can impose upon them our own ideas, concepts and all, but they come with their own purpose. They come with their own mentality, their personality. We are only their caretakers. So let me share those things once if I've been able to retrieve them. And I think it's time to close our Manana.
Yeah, even Prem Bhaiya had shared just a few, I think a month back, this Chinmaya mission, Swami Vimlanandaji's video. Kindly go through it. It's very beautiful.
Yeah. I think all our Manana is centered about children, but I think we will do some Manana on the stanzas itself. They're very beautiful takeaways. Jitatma, Prashantatma, all of that. So
yes, we can have it.
We'll continue the Manana. We'll do our self-study of these two verses that we covered today and maybe continue that tomorrow. Yeah. Bela, you can do the Shanti part.
Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramaya, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kashchid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Om Tat Sat. Sarvam Shri Krishnarpanamastu. धन्यवाद सर्वेभ्यः.